Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that focuses on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Friday morning, guys. It is June 12th, 2026, and welcome to the Choose Views morning show, 6 to 8 a.m., Monday through Fridays. I was talking to somebody on Monday at the Barbara McQuaid book signing, and I was like, when is your show on? So shout out to the folks at Union League Club who were so kind to have a great event. But the number, of course, is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and this is the June 12th edition of such show. Find my show on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, and YouTube. And you can email me at richard@wcpt820.com. Follow me on all the socials under Choose Views, and catch all of our shows by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. There you can get Choose Views featured interviews, Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. And it was nice sitting in for Joan this week on Wednesday. And, of course, Patty Vasquez, driving it home, making your evenings just right. It's the Democracy Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other great shows and interviews. And also in the evenings, making sure that you are plugging into the Politics Bar, the Matt McNeil Show, and the Gailey Show. That is important to me that you guys are checking out our other shows. But I like to get us off to a good day, a good start to a good day. Do our best here with our wonderful team. Shout out to Henry and to Mike and to Whitney. The gift of going over to heartlandsignal.com is you get to see, read, hear, watch some of the great things that have been posted there. Let's see, which one do I really want to lean into this morning? A good op-ed that's at Heartland Signal about the U.S. Supreme Court declaring open season on Georgia's voters. You want to check that one out. It's a really good read. U.S. Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, a Democrat of Pennsylvania, highlights the Trump administration corruption. Quote, "We wonder whether they," meaning Republicans, "will ever acknowledge that fraud and corruption are defining the features of the Trump administration, and whether they're going to leave Americans holding the bill, rather." That comes from U.S. Congresswoman from Pennsylvania, Mary Gay Scanlon. That's one of the great posts at Heartland Signal. Make sure you make your way over there. And another one from her, she says that $25 billion from the ICE reconciliation bill could be used to fix issues like affordable housing, hospital funding, public school funding, child poverty, affordable child care, lowering health care costs, and even part of the deficit. Interesting. But we want to sort of pull Republicans want to pull their, close their eyes to the fact that $25 billion could solve some of the things that are most important. As I said, in terms of we were talking with Mayor Kennedy yesterday from Glendale, Wisconsin, about, what we should be spending our money on, healthcare and services, making sure that our education system is in play, in better straits. And then he added, which I've got to start to add to mine, infrastructure. I think that those three, that's our new trifecta, is healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Imagine what we can do. Imagine what our country would look like and feel like to be in, Henry, if we spent $25 billion on that. How much stronger of a country we'd be, and we'd stop head faking about, how great of a country we are. We actually would be doing the things to continue to make us that great country, rather than just, puffing out our chest, talking about how tough we are. We'd actually be there because we'd be putting the money toward those things, rather than an ICE bill to do what? To mistreat God's children, if you want to call it that. I mean, let's break it down if we're going to go there. But when you really press the GOP and these so-called Republicans that want to call themselves, righteous Americans and all this other labeling, when you really press them, they can't hold up to it. When they really get pressed, I love hearing, watching some of the young cats like Adam Mockler. Man, right, Henry? I mean, he can throw down. That young cat can throw down when it comes to talking to Republicans about the garbage that they're putting out there. We got to get Adam on the show. I said to Mike Nellis, hey, man, help us out here. But anyhow, that's always the case. When we really push back with the Republicans, like Mary Gay Scanlon did from Pennsylvania, they really can't hold up. So that's why I keep saying, stay in the fight, y'all. On today's show, Karen Byrne from TruBlu Politics Podcast will be with us in the 6:30 hour. And we're starting a new series, a little thing that we decided to do to have shed some light on the 250th anniversary of our country. And so over the next 4 Fridays, starting today, we are going to spend some time with some historians in different areas talking about the history of the country in different categories of our history. And today's show, we will have Professor Kevin Schultz, professor of history at the University of Illinois at Chicago, the author of the book, Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, Including White Liberals. He'll be with us at 7 o'clock. And then at 7:30, another great historian and Chicagoan is Michelle Duster. As you guys know, she is the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. And what a blessing to have the great granddaughter of a historian like that, a leader, with us and be part of our show. So Michelle will be with us at 7:30. And in both cases, Professor Schultz and Michelle and I will be talking about the history of no kings and rallies and protests going way, way back. So they're both going to bring their flavor and their observations in that space. And we all might be on together. All three of us might be. I'll just be listening because they're the ones, But facilitating the conversation with these two great historians and great Americans will be a lot of fun. So looking forward to having both of them on. And I'm sure Karen will have some thoughts about a few things too. So she's written a couple of cool things on her Substack that we'll chat about. So that's what's happening, guys. And Friday in any city, it means folks are going to be out and about doing things. Here in the upper Midwest, but specifically Illinois and northern Indiana and parts of southwestern Michigan, and the weather said, hey, guess what? We're going to rain and blow and all that kind of stuff. I was sending out text messages to people last night going, are you home? Are you hunkered down? But I hope everybody that is impacted, I know that I've still got some family and friends who were without power going back to Wednesday, and they're finally getting back online. So anybody that you know, like I said yesterday, that may have been impacted by this weather, just think out of the box who might have been, give them a holler and check in on them, make sure they're doing okay, because that sucks when you don't have power. And in that space around our grid, this is an infrastructure thing, Henry, like Mayor Kennedy was talking about yesterday. Imagine if we put, the additional monies into our infrastructure to be even more prepared so that when these kinds of things happen, we're stouted up. And a little less concerned about if power goes out, how quickly am I going to be back to normal? How much, I'm reaching, and I get this, but how much would it benefit families if, we had the capacity? First of all, we short up all of our electrical grids, all of our power grids, I should say. But how cool would it be if we were able to create a tax incentive, y'all, so that everybody had a generator attached to the dwelling that they're living in? So if you live in a 6-unit building, that there's a couple of generators for that property. If you live in a single-family home, we afforded everybody a tax credit. I would much rather that than sending money to Israel. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not sorry for saying that. I'm actually very proud to say that. I would much rather us spend that money on making sure that our power grid was strengthened. And if it's something as simple as creating a tax credit, we create tax credits for all kinds of things for, some unsuccessful sports franchises across the country. I'm a little spicy this morning. I got to get ready for Karen and for Professor and for Michelle because they bring it. So I got to get ready. But no, seriously, think about that, y'all. We created a tax credit for everybody that is in a dwelling. Why not? Just makes our lives better. When power goes out, flip of a switch, boom, the generator's there to make sure that everybody is good to go. But, call me crazy. Question for the day. And it's kind of, first of all, I want to rewind to yesterday's question because I asked this question and I did have a chance to talk about some of the things that you guys were talking about. But let me ask you, or remind you of yesterday's question in case you still want to chime in. Do you think voting is enough? If not, what else do you think we should be doing to keep our democracy strong? That was yesterday's question. Today's question is, if you are required to be a single issue voter, this was your thing, all the other noise couldn't or didn't matter, what issue would you choose and why? Got that, Mike? Is that cool? If you were required to be a single issue voter, what issue would you choose and why? That's our question for the day. Send us a text message with your thoughts. I would say, give us a call if you want to. Text us, and most definitely go to our Facebook page and give us a shout there and say, okay, here's what this is what I would lean into. If you were required to be a single issue voter, what issue would you choose and why? I want to hear from you guys. The number is 773-763-9278. As we take this break, where you're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. And now AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. We will be right back.
It's Choose Views, where we read more than just the headline. Now here's your host, Richard Chu.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. If you're just tuning in, this is Choose Views, and I'm Richard Chu. And here we are with a couple of Choose Views news for June 12th, 2026. The U.S. supplants Russia, Saudi Arabia as a top oil exporter. The United States has emerged as the world's largest oil exporter, surpassing Saudi Arabia and Russia, largely due to increased shale production and geopolitical shifts. I guess that we should blame that on Biden. Okay? Because we can't give Trump, you don't get any credit for this. If you're going to blame Biden for everything else, we'll take credit for this. Joe Biden should get credit for that. The development could weaken the organization of petroleum exporting countries, pricing power, and enhance the U.S.'s leverage in international discussions, according to Reuters. So there you go. We'll see. Washington has a new tool they didn't realize they had before the Iran war, energy exports. But, hey, that's Joe Biden. That's because of Joe Biden. Wholesale prices are surging, signaling a bit of inflation. In another sign of inflation stubbornness, the May wholesale prices rose 1.1%, surpassing economists' expectation of 0.07% of an increase. The surge was primarily driven by higher energy costs. The inflation rate hit 6.5% on an annual basis, a peak dating back to November 2022. The Federal Reserve expected to hold interest rates steady in the near term. Market predictions increasingly suggest a potential hike later this year. The new data comes after consumer prices showed a 0.5% jump in May, putting the annual inflation rate at 4.2%. Roughly half of Americans worry AI will take their jobs. The rapid adoption of AI technology across corporate America has workers worried about job security. More than half of respondents in a new survey expressed concern that AI could put them or someone in their household out of work. About 37% said they weren't worried about it, and 10% they were unsure or unwilling to answer the question, as we talked about earlier this week. Jobless claims did rise as hiring challenges persist. More Americans filed for jobless benefits last week as overall unemployment remained steady. Jobless claims rose 4,000 to 229,000 for the week that ended June 6. A survey of economists predicted claims would total 219,000. The news comes after the days after the Bureau of Labor Statistics report showed the unemployment rate stayed stable at 4.3% in May. Still, hiring challenges persist, as indicated by a weekly drop in job creation plans among small businesses. And why is that in terms of creation plans? Because they cannot predict effectively enough when it comes to how tariffs impacted them last year. That's a fact, not just my opinion. All right, guys, a couple of quick Choose Views news items. Thanks for always paying attention to what we give to you there. Today on Live, Local and Progressive, Joan Esposito will be taking your calls for the first half of the show, then talking to Chris Fitzsimmons, host of Stories from the States podcast, Daniel Squadron, president and co-founder of Future Now, and the author of the new book, The Fourth Branch. I talked about this a couple times this week, how state government can save our union. Deborah Carr, president and CEO of Chicago's Intuit Art Museum. So, and also pay attention. You'll be Allison Amick will be along with that visit with Joan. Live, Local, and Progressive weekdays 2 to 5 here on WCPT Central Time, of course. HeartlandSignal.com and TuneIn. Tonight on Driving It Home, Patty Vasquez will be joined by Merrill Miller, market manager of the Jefferson Park Sunday Market, and Jen Van Valkenburg of the Garfield Park Conservatory, which just reopened their children's garden. Samantha Jane of Baked by Jane Chicago Cafe. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez weekdays 5 to 7 here on WCPT, HeartlandSignal.com, TuneIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And then on Monday, guys, I'll be out for the day. Michelle Peltier will be in for me, and her cast include Kenya Merritt, recently appointed commissioner of Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs. And I'll return on Tuesday, of course. The U.S. Senate candidate Charles Booker from Kentucky, and legal scholar and author and podcaster Leah Littman will be with me. I'm going to be attending the Fair Tax Summit as a moderator in Detroit. So looking forward to being there and speaking with that organization, the people that will be in attendance. So that's where I'll be on Monday. Michelle will be here holding it down. So make sure you guys tune in. Next Friday morning, we'll be continuing our America at 250 conversation as we explore Juneteenth, the fight for racial equality and expansion and contraction of the vote in the United States. And at the end of the hour, I'll be joined by Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. So there you go. Saturday, it's the Democracy Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath. Make sure you tune in. Amanda Marcotte, David DeWitt, and Guardian reporter Sam Levine will be with Edwin from 1 to 4 tomorrow, which is Saturday. Tune in, y'all. We'll remind you that again. And, of course, our question of the day is, if you were required to be a single-issue voter, what issue would you choose and why? Let us know what you had to say. Why don't we grab a call before we go to this next break, rather. Let's go to, is it Andre? Yeah, good morning, Andre. Welcome to Choose Views.
Good morning to you, Mr. Chu.
Oh, it's Professor Andre. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm sorry for I missed the introduction. Okay, it's Professor Andre. Good morning, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. So I want to answer your question. You know, for years when you go to apply for a job, they ask if you have a high school diploma.
Okay.
The reason they ask for a diploma is because it verifies that you possess a foundation of reading, writing, and math skills. And more importantly, it signals to the employee that you have the work ethic, commitment, and dependability to stick with the long-term goal and meet deadlines, right? So if I was a single-issue voter, I would vote for the requirements to be president of the United States to be changed. Because as it stands now, you don't have to have a whole lot of qualification for a job such as that, to be 35 years old, to be here 14 years and be born United States citizens is nowhere nearly enough requirements to do their job. So if an employer, hypothetically Burger King or something like that, would see if you have a diploma, then why aren't we requiring more for the people that pursue that position of the United States president to have more requirements? There's many that we tax and everything else. So that's what I would vote on, reforming the requirements for the presidency, which would require probably an act of Congress and deal with the Constitution.
Professor Andre, once again, you are the smartest professor in the room. I hadn't even thought about that. And, we that's why we asked the question, because we wanted to get what you guys are thinking. But that's brilliant. Changing the Constitution so that the president meets a certain standard. If we had to vote, if there were a way to put that into a single issue of voting, maybe that single issue, Andre, is to require Congress to change the Constitution, this gets into that whole conversation around the Electoral College, I think. So maybe what we end up finding out from this, Andre, is that we change the Electoral College. That's the vote. We vote. We have a ballot issue, a U.S. ballot issue to change the Electoral College. And I was talking with some folks. Actually, it was I think it's when I had Frangela on Wednesday on Jones' show. I was talking about the disproportionality of population to U.S. senators and House of Representatives. So you're as always, Professor Andre is on to something. So what can I tell you?
Well, I agree with you 110%, Mr. Chu. I hadn't thought about what you mentioned about the Electoral College. You're absolutely right, because that's a relic of Jim Crow. I mean, it might have been needed at the time, but you don't need an Electoral College now. The popular vote should win. That's just the way it's. You shouldn't have an Electoral College. But I've been sitting on that for a while, Mr. Chu, and I just think it's ridiculous that we have the chaos agent in the White House to say to do all of these things here with minimal qualifications.
Yep.
It needs to be you shouldn't be able to have a felony. You should be able to be recalled if something happens. You should be able to be recalled. All of that stuff needs to be put into a new constitution for presidency. Thank you, Mr. Chief.
Thanks, Professor Andre. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Wow. How about that, guys? Yeah, Andre always brings some interesting thinking to not only the question of the day, but just in general to things that he's been paying attention to. So thank you, Andre. And thanks to so many people that push us in these directions. Let's take a quick break, guys. We got a loaded up show, so I want to stay on point today. 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and our good friends at AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. When we come back, we'll be talking with our good friend Karen Byrne from TruBlu Politics Podcast. We'll be right back.
No fake news here. It's Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. If you are just tuning in, this is Choose Views, and I'm Richard Chu. Thank you for being with us this Friday morning, June 12th, 2026. The title of the article is Where's Hunter? Well, I don't want to take any credit for anything other than reading the title of the article. What we have to welcome, because it's Friday, to the show, our good friend Karen Byrne from TruBlu Politics Podcast. Good morning, Karen, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Richard. Thanks for having me on. How did you guys fare last night with the crazy weather?
Well, as I said before, I was texting everybody, friend and colleague, and all the rest to say, are you home? Are you safely locked in and locked down? But yeah, I mean, actually Wednesday afternoon's storm was, but from a damage standpoint, probably worse than what happened last night. But I just, I'm just hoping that everybody is in a good way this morning and can kind of move forward. I really, like I said earlier, the one of the issues is the people who may have lost power, because that's always the one of the things. You don't want a tree falling in your house, and you don't want to be without power. So one of the alerts
that I got on Wednesday was, "We're sorry that you're out of power." It was like, from ComEd. We weren't. We actually had power, but we got this message, and they were saying that power would be restored on Saturday. And I thought, oh my gosh, that has happened to us before, so my heart goes out to anybody that is living without power right now, because it is brutal.
Yeah, I know.
It really.
Let's spend $25 billion in tax credits on generators for every occupied domicile in the country, so that people don't have to, worry about what happens if they run out of if power goes out. So there you go.
Absolutely.
So Karen, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I do want to get your thoughts on this. The question of the day was, if you were required to be a single issue voter, what issue would you choose and why? You don't have to answer that question. Just let it ruminate a little bit for a minute. We can maybe swing back to it before we wrap up today.
Well, I've been thinking about it. I have an answer. So
okay.
I would say, really quick, I would just say expand this and reform the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That's my single issue, because it has such an effect on everything else. It is what enables power and unchecked corruption and unchecked power, for that matter, to go on. And I feel like if we did that, we would be able to go after the Epstein class in a better way. And I think that ties in with it. I really do, with all the dark money that is in the Supreme Court.
Yeah. We wouldn't have, if we had if we had an expanded Supreme Court to match the federal level, and I know some people disagree with this, but I think that gives us it puts us in a better position when it comes to justice bias, because that's what 6 justices truly are leaning into in the last few years, is just judicial bias.
Yes.
So, and mine, I would ride along with you in this craziness. Mine would be the enshrining of the Voting Rights Act, making sure that we establish a baseline of age and citizenship, however we structure it. Basically, we don't have to create anything. Just go with the John Lewis amendment. That would be my thing, because that would then put everybody. It wouldn't create the situation where we got this imbalance. But there you go.
Yes,
That's
but
me.
I think we have to do something. But I think we have to do something to the Supreme Court first in order for that to be protected.
Yeah, probably, because that's been the barometer of so many things that we're dealing with right now, is how the Supreme Court, at least the conservative 6, have been operating. So. Yeah. So Karen, you wrote you and Anita did a nice little podcast on Substack around. It's entitled, guys, "Where's Hunter? The right, meaning the political rights, the GOP's obsession with Hunter Biden might work in our favor after all." So. I'll read a couple of points from it. What do MTG, the MAGA cult, internet trolls, the Trump kids, and President Dumpy all have in common? Their total and endless obsession with Hunter Biden. And Barack. You know who the 2 people they're most obsessed with, the GOP at large, as Barack Obama and Hunter Biden. They just can't keep their names out of their mouths.
And Large Marge has I think she's got a crush. That's what I think.
She does. She does. Who else brings pics of somebody else's anatomy to the House of Congress and shows them off like, I have these in my wish book. These are the expanded versions. Why, Hunter? Here I am. And no denigration to Hunter Biden, who was going through some stuff at the time that those photographs were taken, but. Yeah, their obsession is crazy, Karen.
It's something else. It is something else, But he is really monopolizing on it, but he's doing it in a way. So he's all over Twitter, which of course the irony is, that it's Elon Musk's platform that he overpaid for and trashed. But that is the platform that he is on and is engaging with these people, and he's doing it with such wit and compassion, and even just, he's just real. He's just putting it out there as real as can be. And, there have been actually some exchanges with these people that have, they've given him props, for the way he's been conducting himself and carrying himself, and, the way he's been able to overcome the addiction. Because, I know Stephanie was talking about this. There is not one family in America that is not touched by addiction. No,
of some sort. And it isn't always drugs. Drugs and alcohol, how smoking leads to, smoking itself and the addictive nature of nicotine and what that can cause. And there's just a number of sexual addictions, gambling. The list goes on. But to your point, it's so well put. There isn't a family that has. I remember something that the comedian I think it was Chris Rock that said this. He said that everybody has somebody in their family that doesn't fit the perfect mold of what that person should be like, or what that family should be like. And so, and I'm paraphrasing how he said that, but he was telling a joke, so I can't use the profanity that he used in that space. But he was basically, right. He was basically saying, listen, we all got some, mucked up stuff going on in our families. And if we can acknowledge that, and it's not even mucked up, it's just things that make us real. Actually, I think that's what allows us to search for dignity and humanity, is to recognize that we all have these imperfections. And the John Legend song, I always mess this up, but you know which one I'm talking about. I love you for all your curves and imperfections, or whatever the lyrics are. Sorry, John Legend. But sorry, Karen.
It's okay. We're going to do karaoke sometime, and I want you to do that song.
No. I'll set up the equipment. I'm not. No. Mike's sitting back here going, oh, yeah, we got to get Rich on the mic, on the other mic.
Ooh, let's do it. Come on.
Hey, listen. All right, y'all. Don't go there. I did sing in the choir in church for a number of years.
Okay. So. Come on. No. Listen, little secret about me. I have my own karaoke machine. And, that is like a...
Karen's out there wilding out. Wow.
We'll have to... And it's portable, so watch out.
Karen showed up at people's front yard going, I got a song for you.
Give me some requests. Anyway.
Oh Lord, we just slid into the ditch. My goodness.
We did. Hey, it's Friday. But no, I just feel like, again, like we have all been touched by addiction, whether a loved one, a friend, It is something that is insidious. It is something that, I think as a culture, we have not been able to find compassion about. It was interesting, and, it kind of reminds me, there a day last week, I pulled up to my usual coffee place, and there was this gentleman, and he had fallen asleep on a bench, and it was kind of a handmade bench. And he was really, really, you could tell, intoxicated. So I was concerned about him. I wanted actually for them to send an ambulance over, but, of course, they send the police as well. And, I'm talking to the police officer. The ambulance did arrive, and they were going to get him some help because the bench had given way, and he fell on his face. And it was really upsetting to see this gentleman in this condition. And so they came and they got him, but the police officers showed up, and, I just said, I feel so bad, and he's like, why? It's life choices. That's, people that make life choices don't feel bad. And I was, and I just thought in that moment, I said, this is part of the problem with our culture. Is that, that kind of an attitude, and that kind of an attitude who is being paid to serve and protect the community. I just, we need more love. We need more compassion for people that are struggling with addiction. I think that, I've been in situations where you've had to do a little bit of tough love,
right.
As a last resort. But, overall, as a society, we have to do better.
Karen, I've looked
at Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah, good on Hunter for that. I've looked at, and we're going to I'm going to say this, and we'll take a quick break, and there's a couple of things I want to get your thoughts on. But I've looked at those situations, and I've said that officer doesn't know the history of what happened with that man. He could have been coming home from work one day and got broadsided in his car and lost his job, didn't have health insurance to heal. And everything spiraled from there. So what kind of choice did he make? The choice to get home, to come home from work and take care of his family. He made the choice to come home and then slipped into an addiction because he lost his job, didn't have the medical coverage to sustain and maintain and sustain himself. And then he didn't fall off the wagon. The wagon was the only thing that he had. So when I hear stuff like that, see, this is where I always say that there is a higher power, because if I had been you in that moment, or thank God I wasn't there with you in that moment, because I would have had something else to say to the police officer about his reaction. What about the day when your child is coming home from soccer practice and somebody plows into him, and then your son slides off? I hate when I hear people say things like that. But again, kudos to Hunter for being willing to come out and speak his truth. This was a great post by you and Anita. We got to take this quick break, as you know we got to do. But thanks, Karen. We're going to come back and talk about a couple other things that are going on. 773-763-9278 is our number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from WARR in Warren County, North Carolina, and now AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu, and we'll be right back.
Mike's on, truth's out. This is Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. If you are just tuning in, this is Choose Views, and I'm Richard Chu with our good friend Karen Byrne from TruBlu Politics Podcast. Excuse me, Karen. There are so we had this really some great responses to the question about the single issue, and obviously yours is a great one in terms of stouting up and strengthening the U.S. Supreme Court. One of the our listeners, Shirley in Philadelphia, says she would focus on veterans' benefits and support.
Yes.
Veterans come back from war, and they don't always get the care that they need. They want to make sure that we strengthen that so that veterans are cared for. I would 1,000% agree with that. And again, this just goes to show we have some issues that are not being attended to in the country. I get it.
Right. Well, and again, like with that gentleman I was telling you about, we don't know that he wasn't a veteran.
Thank you.
Came back and had PTSD and was self-medicating.
Yep.
So this flip response by the police officer that life choices, don't feel bad, and I'm like, I had a really good friend who last summer passed away because alcoholism took him, and he did multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I know that there was a lot of pain there.
Yeah,
so,
and that's why and on certain days I have to pull myself back from certain things where I may want to be critical. I ask the higher power to catch me when I'm about to be less than compassionate in a situation, because we don't know what is going on when that person's in private and what they're saying to themselves and what things they're telling themselves about how they are. So, yeah, I mean that, and there's a couple other people that have said they would work really hard to make sure we strengthen our medical systems, and so that's another category that just is part of what we're talking about. Karen, here's something that I sent you this article briefly, and it's about where we are with our House Republicans that are not showing up.
oh my!
Yeah, so
are they embarrassed?
check this out, guys. House Republicans are either who are either running for offices or facing tough primaries have stopped showing up to work, and on multiple occasions have put Democrats in the majority. So they're kind of blowing off, showing up on the floor, which means Democrats have found themselves in an unprecedented position of being the minority party, but having the majority of the votes. See, this is what we've been talking about. They're not showing up because well, I'm not going to say what they know, but they know. So imagine, y'all, imagine what that's going to feel like for us to have that be a regular thing for 2 years. How cool would it be, Karen, for the second 2 years of Donald Trump's final presidency to have the Democrats in control of Congress? And just,
my gosh, it would be amazing.
Causing him to be stressed all the time. Talk to me, girl. Talk to me.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, it would be amazing. And that is exactly why the work between now and November needs to be getting every single person that we know registered and ready to vote, have a plan. We know that they're going to do some stuff.
Yeah.
But, this is, this is going to be, we say this all the time. This is going to be the most consequential election of our lifetime and in our democracy. This is truly, because if we do not get the numbers that we need, not just like, the majority, I want huge numbers. Yeah. I want us to be able to just completely conduct all of the investigations that we need to conduct, and hopefully the Democrats are organizing themselves where it's like, okay, you guys are going to take, everybody has their tasks, right? And they're keeping a list. I know that I read something that Jamie Raskin was a part of a group that they are keeping a list.
Yeah.
Of all of the things that they need to address. But, we are not going to be able to move ahead in this country until we root out the criminality and the corruption that is in the Republican Party. We know already the Democrats are going to do that work. We have done that work. We continue to do that work. When one of our own needs to be pulled, then that's what we do. Because that's the kind of party that we are. We believe in accountability, and that and we conduct ourselves with higher standards. The Republicans, I know that your audience knows this already, so I'm preaching to the choir. But this party is completely, and if they were doing it on the down low before, it is out in the open. And this is the thing: Donald Trump didn't change this party; he revealed them. They have always been criminal. They have always been corrupt. And now is going to be the time, if we can do this, if we can get enough Democrats in, where we can actually conduct the hearings, do the investigations, conduct the hearings, hold them accountable. Donald Trump may have immunity. The rest of these MFers around him do not.
Nope, they do not. And I think that is tying itself to why Republicans are, in many cases, trying to find an off-ramp, or they're becoming very, very quiet. Because here's my thinking, Karen, and I could be crazy in this one, but I think a lot of Republicans are going silent right now because they don't want to have anything on record showing or saying that they said something that, when it comes to the point where, and I'm talking about Republicans in Congress, not just the folks in the administration or the cabinet, when it comes to time where the Democrats have taken back the House and maybe the Senate, that's on recording. And a good example of this is what Representative Amelia Sykes did the other day. And I can't think of the cabinet member she was talking to, but basically she asked him about something that Donald Trump said around we're taking the oil, right? We've taken the oil, and Iran doesn't know it till right now, because I'm just saying it right now. And she asked the cabinet member, and I can't think of his name now, but was
it Scott Bessent?
No, it wasn't him. I don't.
Okay.
And if you and I are walking together and I see him on the street, you got to tackle me, because his smug face needs to be. Anyhow, we'll keep going. In any event, Amelia Sykes was questioning a member of the cabinet about this oil that we're apparently taking from Iran. And she said, so you basically don't know anything about this. I'm paraphrasing y'all. And then he said, yeah, no, I'm not, the president's fine in that space. And then she played the tape of the president saying that we're taking the oil. And then came back from the tape and asked him the question again. And she said, so you're telling me you weren't aware of this and you're telling me that it's okay. And she basically boxed him in. And so my point of all this is, to wrap this up, is that I think Republicans are starting to see that Democrats are going to, I mean, if they're talking and running their mouths about things, or if they said certain things, and if they've been in part of testimonies and they weren't telling the truth, or they didn't come clean, that it's going to come back and bite them in the behind that the Democrats are in control. So.
Absolutely. So
and it should.
Amelia Sykes. It was the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright.
Chris Wright. Thank you. Yes. And she kind of busted him. She kind of busted him.
Yeah.
She made him go on the record of saying that it was okay to take the oil, and that the president sometimes speaks in certain ways differently to different people. But at the end of the day, it's still a lie. So,
Absolutely.
Kudos to our
Absolutely. I mean, it is, and then I was, we're going to strike Iran. Now we're not going to strike Iran. And, oh, by the way, Richard, we're going to have a peace deal this weekend. I hope you know that. We're so close.
Hey, Karen, as we wrap up, let me ask you a question. Do you like tacos?
I do. I love tacos. It's not even Tuesday, and I love tacos.
And Donnie is the chief taco designer. So that's who we got. Karen Byrne from TruBlu Politics Podcast. Check her out, guys. Check out what she's doing on Substack. Karen Byrne from Resistance Journal. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. Make it a safe weekend.
Thank you.
And
everybody have a wonderful weekend. We've got a respite from the crazy weather, so enjoy. It's supposed to be beautiful. I'm going to the Highland Games with my dad and the rest of my family.
That'll be cool.
So whatever you do, stay safe and enjoy.
All right. Be well. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Love you guys.
All right. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, WARR 1520 AM 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and now AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. When we come back, boy, oh boy, we're going to be talking about history as we lean into 250 years of America. We'll be with Kevin Schultz, professor and chair of the Department of History at the University of Illinois, Chicago. We'll be right back.
Richard Chu's got his eyes on the truth.
And you're right where you need to be.
This is Choose Views.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. The question of the day is, what if you were required to be a single issue voter, what would you vote on and why? So a couple of quick run through these real quickly. Environment, conservation, protect our public lands as a singular issue. Thanks, 815. That is brilliant. Let's see what else we got real quick before we go to the doc. Single issue, healthcare for all. Okay, right on with that. End Citizens United. Time to get big money out of politics, certainly dark money. And let's see what we got. Single issue to improve property and properly fund education. I'm sure Professor Schultz has something to say about that. And let's see what else we got. SCOTUS. Yeah, can't argue with that. So there you go, guys. Thanks for chiming in on question of the day. He just had to show off his shirt. He's just that kind of a cool dude. Did you guys see what he just did on camera? He stood up. There it is. Department of History. Ta-da! He did like a Superman pose. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about our good friend and just wonderful dude, and has really made a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And his information on our show has been just phenomenal. Professor Kevin Schultz is the professor and chair of the Department of History at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And he just showed off his real cool shirt. That was his way of kind of saying, yes, I'm here, y'all. Get ready. Good morning, Doc. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Richard. I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty good.
All right.
I love the answers to the questions from our listeners. That's really exciting.
Isn't that cool? I mean, and I thought about this the other day, and I said, I'm going to wait till Friday because, we have so many issues, but I wanted to hear from where people are. If you had to be a single issue, that's all you could vote on. This is your thing. And, once again, we've got these great folks that are chiming in this space, and I love it. I'm honored that people would have, these kinds of, they know that there's a thing that's important to them, and they would want to vote singularly on that. So, welcome. Good to see you again. We're approaching our 250th. I was talking with someone the other day that said that they were born like 2 months before our 200th anniversary. So they were an infant 50 years ago. And they were saying, wow, here we are 50 years later. And, what's changed in our country. And it's really fascinating when I think about that. I didn't, from that perspective, I was 14 years old. So I remember it very well. But now to think that we've gone 50 years, we're about to celebrate 250, and have we improved? Have we stayed stagnant? Have we gone backwards? I don't know what the answer is. I've got my opinions, but I guess it depends on what the criteria would be to answer that question. But I know we're going to talk about no kings and the history of no kings, but in the last 50 years, if you go back to our last big seminal celebration at 200 years, now we're at 250, what would be your observations about these 50 years?
So I was actually having this conversation exactly with my mom when I was visiting her a couple months ago, and she went and pulled out, the listeners can't see this, but she went and pulled out this magazine, this Newsweek magazine from July 4th, 1976. So I'm holding it up to the camera. And the reason she kept it was because my great aunt was interviewed because she was 100 years old in 1976. So they wanted to interview somebody who was born in 1876 to talk about how things had changed. So many things had changed. But as I've leafed through this magazine, this gets right to your question here on what's changed, what's not changed. I think a couple things. One, I think the language we use to talk about people has become much gentler, much kinder, much more empathetic. I think from our perspective, we want to sort of see everything as sort of bad and everything's going backwards. And that's part of what animates us to engage in the fight to preserve our democracy. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when I was leafing through this magazine, the way people were casually talking about Black people or what a women's role should be seems to me today, 50 years later, to be so retrograde and so backwards that it's sort of remarkable how much we have normalized a language of equality. And I want us to be critical of the United States because that's what the Declaration of Independence invites us and actually forces us to do. So I want us to continue to hold that tradition, but I also want us to be a little cognizant of some of the accomplishments that we have normalized. And by the word normalize, I mean, we forget that we've actually made these accomplishments. Even today or yesterday, my wife and I were talking about the movies we grew up with in the 1980s and 1990s, 16 Candles or Pretty in Pink. And if you watch those movies now, you'll be shocked by how openly racist they are to the Asian characters or by the way that they take too casually rape scenes.
I know.
Whereas today you could not, thankfully, make those kinds of movies or have those kinds of lines because they are demonizing kind of people. They're sort of, talking ill of sort of ways that we are uncomfortable with today. So I do think there have been some significant changes for the good that I want us to remember. One other thing that I will bring up when I refer to this magazine from 1976.
Wow.
Is how open they were then to talk about conversations about equality, how open they were then to talk about the rights of a citizenry to enact change. Remember, this is after the Watergate incident when Nixon used the federal government to spy on his opposition so that he could secure the election in 1972. So there was a lot of mistrust of government and a lot of power put to the people, and they were openly engaging in this conversation in ways that in your childhood and mine, definitely in the 1980s and 1990s, they got a lot quieter after that. So those were some of the things that I noticed that were different in the last 50 years right away. And I do worry about that second one, that we're not more open today in talking about income inequality and how democracy has to be used as a verb and put on the streets and activism is okay. I was reading about some of the activism of the 1970s when we had these gas spikes, and there was panic at the pump because of the wars in the Middle East in 1973 and 1979. Truckers who were being, hugely overcharged for diesel gas, they engaged in strikes. Whereby they would just close the freeways. They would stop on the freeways and close the freeways for miles. It would just be a row of truckers that would close Interstate 80. And all of a sudden, what are you going to do? It becomes a national problem. And if we saw that kind of thing today, it sort of seems like it would be momentous. It would be put down by the cops, and the armed forces would be called. So this engaging in this level of civic protest seems to be a foreign country.
Professor Schultz, Dr. K, I got to tell you, I remember that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember literally being in those moments where it was actually happening. And, my mom and dad and I did a lot of road trips down to Mississippi to see family and by car. And so the oil and gas issue and the trucker issue was a big deal, and it certainly is one that, having experienced it, and then to your point, to look back and go, wow, what would it be like if something like that happened today? I mean, how would it impact us? Talk about protests, because that was a protest. That was protest. What do you think that would look like if today, with the fact that farmers and men and women who are truckers, as my father used to say, if you got it, the truck brought it. If they decided that, they're not listening in Washington. They're not listening in some of our state capitals, but they're certainly not listening in Washington when it comes to the tariffs and this war. We're going to shut it down. We're going to go on strike. And farmers decided to jump in their tractors in certain communities in the country, certain rural-esque or suburban communities, took their tractors to the street and said, move us. What would that look like as a protest right now? When we talk about the history of protesting in America, how do you think that would impact us?
I think it would impact us tremendously. I mean, it would send a huge signal to the administration in Washington, D.C., but I don't honestly care that much about the administration in Washington, D.C., because I think they have their narrative and they're not necessarily going to change. I think those protests would actually have trickle-down effects to the House of Representatives, to even the Senate, and definitely in local elections. I mean, I had a friend who got laid off from a job where he had worked for 18 years. About 2 months ago, he got laid off. And he was one of thousands of workers at this huge company owned by the Ellison family that got laid off. And guess what the headline was? Stock price goes up after trimming of costs. And I think this is the kind of thing this president celebrates. We're having the greatest stock market in American history, but what are the costs of doing good by corporations? It has these human costs that I think he doesn't really recognize or want to recognize. And I think the more these kinds of protests, the ones that we're talking about here, happen, the more that they can't help but be noticed. I mean, look at the ICE attacks that we had last year. Those were remarkably public. They were on the streets of America, and they engaged in conflict in ways that were maybe designed to engage in conflict, but they certainly received conflict in the way that the great civil rights marchers, Martin Luther King called it Operation C, Operation Conflict, where let's get these people to stand up for what they believe and fight for white supremacy. Or in our case, let's get these people to stand up for what they believe in, which is terrorizing immigrant neighborhoods without justifiable cause. And I think that actually had such a profound effect on the administration that, don't get me wrong, ICE is still active. There's still deportations happening in our streets, but it's certainly not as public as it was last summer. And that's so I do think these kinds of protests actually have these tremendous effects.
Yeah, Attorney Kate Lincoln Goldfinch was on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about that. And she said that they're still there, and they've gone quiet in many ways. And she said, and that's a concern of hers, because the protest component to them being the reason that the protests were working is that it outed the public nature of what they were doing. And so the fact that they've gone quiet isn't a good thing. And furthermore, they just got what was it, $70 billion, guys, or $50 billion to continue to further wreak havoc. Or be in a position where they're wreaking havoc and snatching babies and all the things that we were protesting about last year, which was kind of the genesis of the modern day No Kings rallies that we've had. Is really that started out of what was happening with ICE in 2025. So I have to figure out how to say this as quickly as my brain will allow me to do this. Let's take a break. I'll figure it out. When we come back, I'll talk about how I want to say what I was about to say. 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, along with our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm talking with Professor Kevin Schultz from the University of Illinois Chicago's History Department. He's the big daddy swinger over there. I'm Richard Chu, and we'll be right back.
Debunking the lies your uncle saw on Facebook. It's Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Welcome back to Choose Views, guys. I'm Richard Chu, and I'm hanging out with Professor Kevin Schultz of the University of Illinois Chicago's History Department. He is the chair of the department and is with us this morning and will be with us the next 3 Fridays to talk about 250 years of America and different topics that we feel are important that we poke the bear a little bit about their impact on us. I was going to say earlier that the protest that we've seen in the last 12 to 14, 16 months, 18 months, depending on how far back you want to go with this current administration, they've been exposing the problems that this administration has really, really caused. Okay, and in some people's minds might say they were there, that they just ripped the Band-Aid off. And however one looks at it, going back to what Kate Lincoln Goldfinch said, the fact that ICE has kind of gone silent in some ways isn't, I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but the reality is we don't see what they're doing as readily as we had been. And of course, 2 people should not, or 3 people, depending on how you look at how they were killed, should not have lost their lives in this fight. But that caused us to get out and do what, goes back to the American Revolution, and that's protest. So I had to think, I have to be sensitive in how I'm saying this. I want to see what ICE is doing. I want to know what the hell's going on when they just got another $70 billion. Professor, talk to us about that.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the semi-quincentennial. Okay, the 250th birthday.
Is that 1776? Okay.
Yeah, 1776. We're having the 250th birthday of the Declaration of Independence. And I think it is striking that exactly at this semi-quincentennial, I learned to say it, so I want to say it a lot here. I think that it is interesting that the language that is causing or leading the coalescence of the left is no kings.
Yep.
Now, look, you know I'm a historian of our political language and the kinds of words that we can use and have been used in American history to bring together coalitions. And I worry actually quite often about what a patriotism of the left might look like these days. Now, most of the listeners of this feel very patriotic, but also feel like their patriotism has been stolen by the right. It's easy to wave the red, white, and blue or put on a pin on your lapel or whatever it is and claim to be patriotic. And I think the right has an easier time claiming American patriotism. And I think the left has historically always had a much more difficult time being patriotic and forcing the country to live up to its ideals. A quick sidebar story, a good friend of mine is a labor leader here in Chicago and was just on strike about 3 months ago and wanted to bring an American flag on the picket line to show that they were fighting for good Americanism. And actually, the other striking workers pushed back on the use of the American flag because it was so associated with the right, with Donald Trump, with the MAGA movement, that they were afraid that they would be associated with the right instead of what it was they were doing. So my friend, who is a labor organizer, who's putting his body on the line, was not able to bring an American flag on the picket line. Now, I have huge problems with this as an American who wants the country to live up to its best ideals, which I do think are enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, which we're celebrating the 250th anniversary. So to get back to my point, how can we have a patriotism of the left where people buy into things as simple as the World Cup? We should be rooting for the United States. You shouldn't be rooting for, I mean, sure, we're a nation of immigrants, so root for your country, your country
Your birth
of
country,
origin.
yeah.
Right, fine. That's great too. But also, the United States is the 16th ranked soccer team in the world, and it's participating in this. So let's have some patriotism on the left as well. I think the No Kings rally is actually brilliantly marketed because I think it is pushing on pushing against the notion that we're living in an era of rising authoritarianism, which I think is a fair critique and very widespread, no matter what your single issue is. If it's healthcare, if it's Citizens United, if it's education, you can say that this administration has expanded executive authority to push a different vision of what American history is into our education system, to allow corporate dollars, what's happening today that the news people have just talked about on our show, to allow the first trillionaire to be created today with the SpaceX public offering, which many of our retirement accounts are going to invest in, whether or not we want it to, because that's the way this law has been written. So I do think this No Kings is a way and a language for the left to rally in ways that it has not been able to in the past. So I'm a fan of this kind of language as far as pushing back and bringing it. It's been successful at bringing millions and millions of Americans out to the streets 3 separate times in the last 18 months or so. I think the use of the language of kings is something that has a really interesting history in the American past. John Adams was the first president to be accused of being a king because he was using the Sedition Act of 1798, which was a real terrible thing. He was worried. He looked at France and he saw what true democracy was doing with the rise of the French Revolution and the executions coming from the left. And he was worried that true democracy was going to be a beheading fest. And so he used the power of the government to make speech illegal when it was especially partisan speech against his party. And what happened? The American people rose up and protested against John Adams, voted him out of office in the election of 1800, and we actually had the first exercising of democracy, which is a peaceful transfer of power from one party to the next, when the Federalist Party of George Washington and John Adams stepped down and allowed the Democratic Republican Party of Thomas Jefferson to move into place without a January 6th fiasco, without any sort of violence happening. You have this peaceful transfer of power, and it was pushing back against this notion that John Adams was using the power of the government to become or exercise the powers of a king. One thing that's really interesting about the No Kings stuff in history is how it has been used by the left in the way that I just sort of talked about with John Adams, or the way I talked about today, pushing back against the Trump administration. But it's also been used by the right to push back against Abraham Lincoln when during the Civil War, he got rid of the habeas corpus right, which allowed people to protest their arrest and imprisonment. Now, this was during obviously a time of violent war when more than 600,000 Americans were dying and there was literal violence on the streets of American cities. Franklin Roosevelt was accused of being a king because during the Great Depression and during World War II, he exercised several executive orders. He is now in second place to the number of executive orders he issued, second place to Donald Trump, of course. But he was first place for a long time because he was using the power of the presidency to try and benefit the American populace by making banking regulations and by making certain regulations, of course, most famously using the executive order to remove Japanese Americans from their homes and move them to, they weren't called concentration camps, they were called relocation camps, but they were essentially concentration camps, internment camps in the West Coast. So there were all of these are accusations that American leaders have been kings, but they've been effective in the past. Sometimes it's when the American presidents have used their power to push equality, and the conservative forces have pushed back on that by declaring them a king and trying to create popular revolt. And sometimes it's been the opposite, like what we're seeing now, where we're looking at authoritarian overreach by a government that was fairly elected in 2024. Let's not forget that. But nonetheless, they might not have been fairly elected to do the things that they have done. And that's the pushback that we're seeing now. So I am a big fan on this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which has 2 great sentences that I'm going to read. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then the second sentence that follows right after that we don't know as well, is that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Yeah, of the governed. Right? People forget that. Of the governed. The consent of the governed means the consent of the people.
And that's what this that's what these No Kings marches are showing. Yeah. We're revoking our consent of what you're doing.
So I'm going to do something that I don't do often, but our next guest, Michelle Duster, is one of the biggest voices in Chicago, if not the country, when it comes to American history. And her approach is oftentimes looking at American history when it comes to civil rights, specifically African Americans' input. Her, as you know, she is the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. And I want to have a little bit of time to have you guys be able to be introduced. I don't think you guys have met formally, but I do want to make sure that when we come back from the break, I have a chance to introduce you guys and then chat for a minute and get some of Michelle's take on a few things that you just said and her own takes on this. So let's take a quick break, guys. 773-763-9278 is a number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM. From Warren County, North Carolina, I'm Richard Chu. And I can't forget our great friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu. Take it away, Richard.
Show, if you are just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu, and this is Choose Views. We've been talking with Professor Kevin Schultz, who is the chair of the Department of History at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And now joining us is my good friend and another historian, the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. Michelle Duster is with us. She's a columnist, cultural education editor with Rebellious Magazine, and just another big brain person that understands history, writes about it, keeps us plugged in, just like Professor Schultz does. But I wanted to take just a moment before we let Professor Schultz go. Michelle, you guys had not met on the show, but you both have been so integral to informing and educating our audience about history, about a lot of social affairs and social issues. So I just wanted you guys to have kind of a radio Zoom handshake and introduce the two of you to each other in my goofy way. So, Doc, meet Michelle. Michelle, meet Doc.
It's an honor. I think if we meet over the radio or Zoom, it's called Amigos. So now we're Amigos.
Okay.
Well, you both have been so important to our audience, and what you both have said on the show when you've been on, and what you've written at large. And I think that the one of the things that we struggle with in the country, and we certainly are right now, is people tapping into history. And there's so much I think fix to current problems when we look at history, because if nothing else, it teaches us, or it should. Don't do that again, because history shows that it's not going to turn out particularly well if we do that again. Let's move over here and let's use history as a platform to maybe say, how can we improve what we're doing, and how can we improve or make for a better route with where we're trying to go? Michelle, talk to us a little bit about the history as you see it as it relates to protest. I mean, right now, No Kings is what Professor Schultz and I were talking about. But when you look at the rallies and the protests that have taken place in the last year and a half, specifically to No Kings, what have been some of your thoughts there?
I think that it's a good thing for people to make themselves seen. And the more people that are seen, the more it sends a message that there are critical mass of people who are not happy with the way things are going. I do believe that a more sustained presence would be a little bit more effective because you can have a protest for one day and then everybody goes home and the people that they're protesting don't really take it that seriously because they're like, they're just going to do this for a day and go home and, be done. So I've been more looking at like what's happened in Albania, where these people are out in the streets for like 2 weeks. And I think that kind of sustained mass protest that cannot be ignored is more effective than a one-day protest.
Yeah, that's been what a lot of people have asked. So what's next after we have a protest, whether it be No Kings or any of? I mean, obviously, No Kings has been the big one in the last year plus. But the question that I'm often asked when I talk about we had a protest, we had a rally over the weekend, and wherever it was in the country, what's next? What do we do next? And when you talk about sustained protest, Michelle, it doesn't seem like, and this kind of goes into something that Kevin was saying a moment ago, that it doesn't seem like the protest. Well, let me put it this way: if the protests don't have some sustainability to them, an ongoing effect, then it in some ways gives the other side, that which we're protesting against, a little bit of a little power or a little push that, like you said, they're only there for this day or this weekend, and now we can go back to the raucous behavior that we've been doing before. So if that's going to be where we could go when it comes to protests being more sustained, what do you think it will take to have people be willing to do that? I mean, Michelle, what do you think about that? And then Kevin, chime in on that.
So like I said, I mean, I've just kind of been watching what's happening in some other countries. I mean, France, for instance, a few years ago had a mass protest when it came to shortening raising the retirement age. You remember that?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've noticed is that in these other countries, what they tend to be protesting is a specific thing. It's not, so like I said, I mean, I live here in the United States, and I know that the people in France were protesting the increase of the retirement age by like 2 years.
Mm-hmm. It was.
And so they were protesting that one issue, and they were out in the streets for like, I don't even remember, it was 2 or 3 weeks or something. It was just unrelenting. And in Albania right now, they've been protesting Jared Kushner and his family from taking over an island that has, protected status when it comes to the ecology. And so that is what they're protesting. It's that one issue, like, do not take over this island. We care about our island. We care about our land, and you can't come over and take over. I think the problem with the No Kings protests is that it's like, what are you protesting? Like, you're just protesting everything? I mean, in the entire administration, for me, I don't feel like there's a specific message and a specific outcome that people are looking for. And I think that's what helps protests become successful, is that you have one demand or maybe two, and it's very clear what you want the results to be, and you don't stop until you get those results. Otherwise, it just comes across, for me, and I've written about this, it comes across as like a parade instead of a protest,
Yeah. No, and you have, and just FYI, in Rebellious Magazine, folks, go check it out. That's where Michelle has written about this. So, Professor, let me ask you this question on the taking what Michelle just said and kind of expanding on it. What ran through my mind is, why? Is it because our country is so doggone big geographically and population-wise, with a whole bunch of issues, obviously. But if we were to take what Michelle just said and look at Albania for an example, or look at what France did in terms of raising the retirement age, those are singular issues. But do you think the country is compact enough to protest singular issues? That's a good question.
I'm a both and kind of guy. And so I think that Michelle is exactly right. And I think that in the United States, we have had single issue day after day protests in Minneapolis, for instance, against ICE. We saw exactly what Michelle is talking about last year. It happened. And it was in some ways successful in that it shone light on an issue that many of us felt was the preeminent example of authoritarian overreach. And it was effective insofar as it ended those sort of dramatic open displays of armed sort of overreach. Although it did not end ICE and it did not end the massive deportations and things like that, it just shifted the way that it was done. So yes, let's have these protests that are day after day, that are massive, that they're in Minneapolis and Chicago and New York and Los Angeles, and they're single issue. But I also think this is the yes and part of it. We do need to continue to have these 20 million people no kings marches, sort of, which is more cathartic for people who are looking for other people so they don't feel alone in being aggrieved by what they see. They don't feel alone in, hey, I just read Animal Farm, and is this what we're watching right now? Or I'm read in 1984, and is this what we're seeing? And so it is sort of cathartic to recognize that there are 10, 12, 15 million other people out there. So I'm really a yes and let's have both of these kinds of things. I think that it would take an issue like gas prices going even higher than they are going to go, or food prices going up before we get more broad, consistent, persistent national kinds of things like we saw with the ICE rebellions in Minneapolis and Chicago and Los Angeles. But I think both of these things are very good. And I do also think, as a student of political language, one of the things we can learn from the Make America Great movement is that you have this slogan, Make America Great, which of course was Harry Truman's slogan before it was Donald Trump's slogan. So this is not anything new or owned by, trademarked by the right. But it is sort of broad and vague enough that it can bring in Americans who felt there was greatness in the 1980s or there was greatness in the 1950s. And so it's vague enough that it allows people to fill in the blanks. And I think the No Kings rallies provides a language. I don't know if it'll be successful, and I do have many questions, just like Michelle said, about its long-lasting efficacy. But I do think it is a large tent kind of movement. And if it can be fed by these more persistent, more consistent, longer-lasting movements, then we're all the better for it.
Yeah. Guys, we're going to take a break and let Professor Schultz get about his morning. Thanks for hanging out with us for a little bit of extended time. I'm glad I got a chance for two of people that I really admire to have a chance to meet. And we'll try to do this again because you guys both do the thing that a lot of people forget about, and that's recognize history is one of our best tools for teaching how we go forward and how we get some stuff right. So, Professor Schultz, thanks for hanging out with us this morning. We will talk again next Friday. Michelle, you're going to stay with us. We're going to take a break and come back and talk a little bit about some current things that are going on. Ha ha, I got you two to me. So, nana nana boo boo to everybody out there. 773-763-9278 is our number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. And now our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. When we come back, Michelle and I will talk about a few more topics of the day. We'll be right back.
We may be waking up, but we're still engaged. It's Choose Views with Richard Chu.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. If you're just tuning in, I am Richard Chu. This is Choose Views, and we're talking with Michelle Duster, historian, writer, columnist. Just, she made sure that the language was right when it came to the coin that honored her great grandmother. So Michelle is the real deal in this space. I want to say something real quick about something that's going on in a couple of weeks, and you'll see some more of this on our WCPT page and on my show page. Michelle this is the fifth year, it's the fifth anniversary of the Ida B. Wells Festival here in Chicago, which is taking place on the 2 weekends from now, the weekend of the 27th. Michelle was kind enough to invite me to be one of the moderators of one of the segments, one of the sessions on voting and the history of voting in America. So I'm honored to be a part of that event. Michelle was kind enough to invite me, and we've been putting it together, and she's done this before. So this is not easy for her, but she definitely has made for a great event the last 4 years. So you guys can plug into this. Before we wrap up, Michelle will let you know where you can go to get access to the event, which will be really a lot of fun and very educational and historical for those of us who have a chance to participate. So lots to talk about, but little time. Michelle, I wanted to get your take on something that I think right now, when we think about protests and we think about action, people being called to action, you said something earlier that I think it's not said enough, and that is sustainability of protest. Is it because people don't care, or people don't care enough, or they? I like what Kevin said about, some people they need to get out of their own space and get out and see that there are other people. But then there's another side of this that troubles me sometimes, is that privilege keeps people from getting out and being active and protesting, even on a weekend protest, let alone something that's sustained over a week or a 2-week period of time. What are your thoughts there?
I think that right now we're dealing with a social environment that's very challenging when it comes to people becoming engaged. I think most people are working so many hours that it's hard for them to carve out time to do yet another thing. I also think we're dealing with a communication environment where people don't even know what's happening. They don't know what to believe, which is intentional.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that people are bombarded and overwhelmed with information or misinformation. And so they don't really understand everything that's going on. And then I think there's just an attitude among some people that if it doesn't affect them personally, then it's not their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the problems that do exist don't impact everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people that it doesn't impact, they just are kind of blasé about it. And then for some people that it does impact, they're so overwhelmed and so busy and don't know where to go or what to do, that it's hard. So I think that we're dealing with a lot of different factors. I do believe, and I'm going to stick with this, that there needs to be a focus of these No Kings protests in particular. I agree with Professor Schultz that obviously the anti-ICE, protests were very focused and had a message and had a goal. But I haven't seen, and maybe I'm just missing it, what the actual goal of the No Kings protest is, except to protest, the direction of the country.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no specific demand to come out of those protests. And I think some people are not engaging in the protest because I know how this is going to sound crazy, but because it's sort of safe it's a safe space to just come out and sort of have a good time with your kids and dress up in little costumes and that kind of thing. So in a way, it doesn't come across as serious enough. It just sort of comes across, like Professor Schultz mentioned, as a way for people to feel like they can be around other people.
Yeah.
But it's like, what's the goal? Like,
yeah.
So
I mean, I could tell you,
I just feel like they're easy to ignore for the people that they're protesting against.
Yeah, that is such a, not many people are saying that what you just said, that the protests have had, the protests are meaningful and they need more definition. I even think, so for example, protesting ICE had its impact. You can't, we can't deny that protesting ICE in Minneapolis had an impact. I won't say it had the impact, but it had an impact. And the impact was the administration realized that they got caught with their shorts down. Some people died, and we have to go in a different direction. That hasn't stopped ICE. As I said before, I don't know if you heard this or not, but immigration attorney Kate Lincoln Goldfinch has said they've just gone quiet, but they're still doing a lot of the things that they were doing before. We just aren't seeing it. And I think, Michelle, that in some ways corporate media has been complicit because they're not out filming what ICE has been doing as much as they were prior to Kristi Noem and is it Doug Bavino? Do I have the right name? Were caught with just this horrible behavior. The corporate media has kind of backed away from showing up at places to film things. So without that, then what the protests were designed to do, in some ways, with the specific protests, has kind of been kneecapped a little bit, and the media has been a contributor to that. That's my observation. Maybe you guys think differently on that, but I agree with you, Michelle. The specificity of the protest is when things really get done. And I love how you brought up what took place in France and of course, what's taking place now in Albania. They are very specific in nature, and they've gotten things and they get things done. What would be the specific thing right now that, if we were to take your advice, which we should, as what would be the specific thing that you think the country, if we're going to have a protest, should be protesting? What would that look like as we wrap up today?
Oh, wow. I mean, maybe just voting rights.
I was hoping you were going to say that. It was a setup question.
I mean, it's because it affects everything. If you don't have the ability to choose the people who represent you, and then the people who do end up in these offices don't address your needs, and maybe specifically dismantle, programs that affect you, and you don't have a voice, then that affects everything. So maybe that would be the one thing that hopefully everybody could agree on, is like, this country, that touts themselves as the greatest democracy ever in the history of the world. We are the beacon of light for the whole world, and, everything great about America. Well, if you're touting democracy, but you're not a democracy, then, then that's hypocrisy. So it affects every single person in this country to have the ability to easily access the ballot and choose the people who will represent you.
Yeah, that's it. I had the question earlier that I have a question of the day, Michelle, and it was, if you're required to be a single issue voter, what issue would you choose and why? And mine was voting rights amendment, voting rights legislation. That was so. I didn't set Michelle up to say that, but there you go. Michelle, we're wrapping up real quickly. Tell folks how they can get plugged into our event in 2 weeks.
So this is the 5th annual Ida B. Wells Festival, which is from 9 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. on Saturday, June 27th. You can find the information, just go to eventbrite.com and then do a search for Ida B. Wells Festival, and you will find everything. There are events for every age group and multiple interests, from walking tours, bus tours. We have kid programs, family-friendly programs. We have a panel that Richard Chu has helped to organize and will moderate, with panelists Devorah Crable, Dr. Anthony Douglas II, Dr. Thomas Fisher, and Congresswoman Robin Kelly. So this will be a very dynamic conversation about voting rights and what we do to keep them and maintain them and just keep our democracy going. And then we have a teen program specifically for teenagers to gather together, watch a film about teen activists and what they can do, have a conversation about what they can do to impact their own community. So there's so much happening. And it's a way to learn about what's happening in Bronzeville, the historical neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, where Ida B. Wells lived her life in Chicago, as well as, so you'd be walking on the space that she lived in, learn about the neighborhood and all of the places that were connected to her, as well as her legacy. People today are continuing her legacy, and that's what the programming is about.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Michelle, thanks for being with us this morning. Always appreciate what you have to say and the moments that you share with us. Thanks for hanging out. You and I'll be talking as we do. So have a good rest of the day, Michelle. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, you too. Thank you.
All right, guys. Listen, stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show. And as always, take a deep breath and make your life count. I will see you next Tuesday. Michelle Peltier will be sitting in for me on Monday. Make it a great weekend.